Hello, hi. My name is Angad, and I'm going to present on the Nordic countries. So, Nordic countries are Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Denmark. Currently, and culturally and politically, they are overpowering group of parliamentary democracy located in the Nordic Europe. Taken together, they combine the seventh largest area in square miles, that is about the same size as India. They have only 26 million residents. Nordic countries are larger than Germany, France, Italy combined. Their combined GDP is 1.7 trillion, which is like 12th richest area in the world. Only Finland changed. Finland has changed its GDP to the euro currency. Uh, Individually, they tend to score most of the achievements in women rights, environmentalism, quality of education, and homeless outreach. Hi, now let's talk about the Nordic economy, which is socialist market economy, social well-being, established economy, and which reviews the taxation also. Nordic economy is a free market. A free market is a market system in which the prices of the goods and the services are set freely by the consent between the seller and the consumer, in which the laws and forces of supply and demand are free from intervention by the government, price setting, monopoly, or any other authority. At the start, free trade in Nordic countries was restricted to export-based goods and manufacturing industries. Regulations by the government in the sectors such as housing, banking, insurance, and retail, along with subsidies to selective firms with the higher tax for the others, was not uncommon. By the 1980s, the country in the Nordic regions were the path of liberalization or already there. Though this was followed by the major fiscal crisis striking the Nordic economies, they never seemed to be diverging from it. Companies is now an essence of Nordic economy, a measure how to free trade it has seeped into the Nordic economy and can be judged by the index of economic freedom that was in 2015 by the Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal. All five countries ranked in top 30 have been described as most free by the index. The Nordic countries were uh, one of the earliest, and the free trade between the countries was because of the exports-oriented manufacturing sector, and hence embraced the globalization from the early stage. According to the Nordic region report, the trade openness and competitiveness combined with the high degree of specializations are important part of the economic Nordic regions. For the four major Nordic countries, except Iceland, total exports and imports of the goods sold at over 60 percent of the GDP in 2012 has given figures of 14. The figures of free trade and globalization are essentially a part of capitalist setup of the economy, whereas the government control over the market and the barriers to the trade are socialist tendency. Let's now that's all about the Nordic economy. Now let's talk on the business culture. Sweden and Finland. There are also differences between the Nordic economies. One such area is the industrial structure. Sweden and Finland both have a relatively large manufacturing sectors. They have some major industrial technological locomotives. In the addition to a pool of small companies, several of these are suppliers to a large companies. Sweden has the natural resources, example copper, iron, and forestry. Traditionally, the hardcore industry, including the shipping building, has been substantially in Sweden. Modern products are a bit more refined, cars like Volvo, computer networks, but still there is a lot of black industry in Sweden. Sweden is also a nation of industry. It produces cars like Volvo and Saba, and planes like Gripen, and has mining, industrialized farming, and production of home appliances and electronics. Denmark. Now let's talk about Denmark. Traditionally, the farming sector is very big. Today, it is still, but it employs uh, far few in Denmark. Denmark has substantial pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. The special thing about Denmark is having many medium-sized and small companies. Denmark has many small, medium-sized enterprises, perhaps due to the location and transport link. Denmark is the center of trade in the location of Nordic headquarters of a number of international companies. Denmark is a traditional and a merchant nation. Now let's talk about Norway. The Norway enterprise sector is, on the other hand, is heavily influenced by the natural resources. Natural, Norway has natural riches like oil. For reason they have a large investment in the oil sector. With the surplus of oil revenues, they have been able to invest in many other sectors. Often outside Norway is surfacing nation substantial activities in the area. Norway is a rich natural resources. Fish and wood plays a role, but oil industry is based on the st- but oil industries are based on the country's most important resources of income. Uh, state State oil is another example, and it is owned by the government company. Another Nordic feature is high share of labor and union membership. Wage negotiation has traditionally been rather than centralized in the income, or in the income is more equally distributed. Role of labor union. The Nordic countries have very high rate of union with the Iceland and Sweden as 85, Denmark at 72%, Finland as 70%, and Norway as 53%. The core capitalist economy like USA, Japan, South Korea, Germany, and has have a rate of 12%, 18%, and 10% and 20% respectively. Whereby socialist economy like Cuba and China have the figures like 97% and 90% respectively. Going to the statistics, we can say that the socialist economies tend to have a very high rate of union density at the Nordic region as a whole, despite of the socialist behavior in the regard. Hi. Now let's start with the Nordic culture. When it comes to the culture, Nordic is unquestionably one of the best cooperative. One of the best. It's very cooperative. It's practical, never showy, acquisitive, and exclusive culture. The Nordic countries does seem to have achieved a perfect balance of personal comfort and the economic strength in the social welfare. This utopia appears to extend into the workplace as well, where you might find the interns and the seniors sitting in the same area, and probably getting the new ideas about their work. And one of the biggest example can be IKEA's founder, who actually takes a bus to eat a meatball and Lejonberry jam, which is in his own canteen. It might seem at the first glance like such an quality and value driven culture would be good at recognition and reward. Yet, in one recent study of Denny's, the biggest factor driving work unhappiness was founded to be a lack of praised recognition. The truth is, the truth is a little more thoughtful analysis observation is required to really understand the complex role and the recognition of the Nordic culture. Some may wonder what the role, reward, and recognition could possibly play in a work culture that is already so intrinsically motivated. More than elsewhere in the world, the Nordic leaders are the cautious about are very cautious about simply importing uh, simply prioritizing the work recognition programs. Such misunderstanding and mismatches can cause the ill-considered recognition program to the misfire or fail in the Nordic workplace. In the recent MBA study of Nordic IT workers at the Cisco and Sony Ericsson, researchers found that the majority of the respondents would appreciate the feedback from the employers. They write individualized reward and recognition motivate an employer more than the general ones. Receiving a personal feedback for a well done work from the manager or a colleague in the maintenance the employee in the positive thinking way about their jobs make them give an extra mile to achieve the organization goals. Personal feedback and recognition not only fit into the Nordic culture, but they are strongly needed in them. Strongly needed. I like to say that I'm aware that it is taking a great deal and liberty to generalize the culture of five unique, diverse Nordic countries like Sweden and Denmark are admittedly more densely populated, urban, and tech-focused and entrepreneurial than the neighbors. Norway is more focused on the oil gas. Technically, a Nordic country and uh, the Nordic country and Finland is known as remote independently they more remote and independent. Likewise, Iceland has faced very unique economic challenges over the past decades. All five countries have their unique characteristic norms and traditions. Thank you. Now let's talk about the political history. Long traditions of democracy, parliament and government, extensive gender equality, high election turnout. Political, there are always exist relationship between the economic and the political system of the country. Around the world, we have seen a very strong and a positive correlation between the democracy and the capitalism and their tendency to exist together. The core capitalist countries essentially are democracies. Mr. Joseph, the great 20th century economist, stated that the modern democracy is a product of the capitalist process and the two mutual supportive parts of a rising modern civilization. Again, abstaining from the commenting upon the kind of economic system which exists in the Nordic countries, let's argue on the line of the political system. Politics of Finland and Denmark functions within the framework of a parliamentary representative democracy. Sweden is a parliamentary representative democratic constitutional monarchy, while in Iceland, politics takes place within a framework of the parliamentary representative democratic public. Norway again is a parliamentary representative democratic constitution monarchy. On the whole, we can say that the Nordic region has a political system which follows the democratic form of the government. on the lines of a strong correlation between the capitalism and the democracy, there is a high probability that the economic system prevalent the region has uh, more symmetry to the capitalism. No extensive codification, rather small-scale legislative acts were there. No legal binding judicial precedent. Uh, Supremacy of the legislative act enacted by the democracy elected bodies. Courts only determine the intent of the legislator. Law as a part of the social engineering political project was welfare state, shared as the theoretical approach of the law as social phenomenon, Nordic convictions of justice, and Nordic Council and intergovernment legal corporations were the kind of rules and regulations that were put in the workforce of the Nordic countries. This was followed by the whole. This was followed by the all the legal bodies of the Nordic countries. Now, I would like to conclude that the economic equality central of the welfare system of the Nordic region is an idea of equality amongst the individual. Policies like redistributive taxations are aimed at promoting the equality in the society. It also limits the control of the economic power to a few rich citizens at the top. According to the Gini coefficient, five Nordic countries have the smallest income departs with the coefficient of 0.25. The taxation, since the government depends upon the public funds of carrying out the different social welfare schemes, and the tax rate, especially personal tax rates are tax rates are comparatively higher than the European and the OECD economies. The average tax rate in the world is 31.37%. The European average is 32%, and the OECD average is 41.58%. The Nordic countries, however, the tax rates are higher than the Denmark at 60.2%, and Finland at 51.6%, Iceland at 46.3%, and Norway at 38.52%, 52%, and Sweden at 56.4%. Post repayment scheme and the unemployment benefits. Any person who is actively looking for employment in the Nordic economy is enlightened to a certain delay allowance, which differs from country to country. The unemployment wages are in some cases even higher than the minimum wage of the economy. This is again and reinforce of the idea of an equality in the economy. Retirement schemes are prevalent in all the Nordic countries. The amount of pension depends upon the time the citizen has lived in the country, the wage of the salary earned by him during the tenure, the number of departments retired as retired has the whether he or she has earned the special pension from the insurance scheme or not.